What's up, guys? Thorias here, and we're gonna do something a little different this time. Obviously, this is not my usual setup. There's no green screen, there's no notes. I'm going completely off the cuff here because, well, some big stuff just dropped, and I wanted to talk about it as quickly as possible. Or as quickly as possible for me, anyway. Sorry. James Gunn just made a big announcement. The new head of the fledgling DC Studios, he just dropped the new slate, or the first official slate, of the DC Studios, new upcoming projects, the first rollout of the new stuff under this new regime. So we're going to watch this video, and I'm going to give you my just initial gut reactions. And I'm pretty excited to talk about this because finally it feels like there's some momentum shifting for DC on film. It feels like a new beginning, a fresh start for DC on film, which they've kind of needed because DC on film has been a bit of a mess for quite a while. Almost since the inception of the DCEU, there have been a lot of problems. I mean, they may have had a plan at one point, but they couldn't stick to it, and they were going in a million different directions, and when one thing kind of underperformed, they'd have this huge knee-jerk reaction and change directions and go off in some other direction, though the roadmap would go out the window, and then they'd try all these different things, and the people at the top kept changing, and everybody would have different ideas and different plans for where to go and what to do, so everything would be totally all over the place and very chaotic. No set direction, basically. Because, you'd have, the Snyderverse, and then you'd have these other characters who don't feel like Snyderverse, but they kind of are, because, they're in the same world, but it's oh, here's Wonder Woman, and then we're gonna do Shazam, and then we're gonna do Suicide Squad, and then we're gonna do Aquaman, and then we're gonna do Black Adam, but it's well, shouldn't there be, a hierarchy of characters, and, the more important ones should come first, and why is this character showing up in that movie when they've got nothing to do with each other, and why are you teasing Black Adam in the Shazam movie when Shazam is not going to show up in the Black Adam movie, and Black Adam is not going to show up in the Shazam movie? Why are you teasing Black Adam versus Superman when Black Adam is not Superman's villain, and all these other things that just make no sense? Why are these characters in that character's movie? They've got nothing to do with each other. Why are they showing up here when they should have shown up in this movie or been in their own movie first? It was all just a big mess. They've just had so many problems for so long. I could go on. I could rant about this all day. So to finally have an official DC Studios and finally have people who presumably know what they're doing at the top making these creative decisions and actually mapping out where they want to go for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, having a plan and hopefully sticking to it and having some continuity and real synergy between all these different projects. If they can actually pull that off, we may finally have something here. And with any luck, James Gunn is going to be for DC what Kevin Feige is for Marvel. And I've been saying this for the longest time. What DC has really been lacking is somebody at the top steering the ship who actually knows what they're doing. Because there's been a rotating panel of people over at Warner Brothers making these decisions, and nobody seemed to really have a concrete idea of how this stuff should be done. At least now it's all going to go through one guy. Well, two guys. James Gunn seems to be the primary architect here. So they've got a creative architect in place. They've got a plan for where to go, what they want to do with all the DC properties. I don't know what kind of reset they're doing, if it's going to be a complete reset of everything, or if it's going to be sort of a soft reboot where some things will be different, but other things will carry over. We'll talk about that. But frankly, rebooting the whole thing, in my opinion, is for the best. There had been so many problems and so many screw-ups and more misses than hits along the way. I don't see how the current iteration of DC on film was fixable. Yeah, there are certain aspects that I kind of wish could continue. I do regret that Henry Cavill will not be getting another solo Superman film, because I felt like he deserved another chance at that. But, the bottom line is, the movies with him as Superman weren't failures exactly, I don't think, but they didn't do what the studio wanted. So, I get it. Starting over, plus new people in charge, they want to do things their own way. I understand that. So, we're going to watch this, and I am excited to talk about what is in store for DC on film, because it's hard to imagine how it could be worse than what had come before. Let's watch this thing.
Hey everybody, I'm James Gunn. I'm the co-CEO of DC Studios. So as many of you know, DC has been disconnected in film and television for a long time. And it's one of, our jobs, mine and Peter's, is to come in and make sure the DCU is connected in film, television, gaming, and animation. That the characters are consistent, played by the same actors, and it works within one story. And if something...
Okay. Right out of the gate, James Gunn is saying all the right stuff. First of all, it's amazing how much a little transparency can do for you. Again, one of the criticisms of DC is the people at the top were changing so often, you didn't even know who was in charge half the time. But here he goes, hi, I'm the guy in charge, I'm calling the shots, I'm making all the creative decisions, I'm the CEO, yeah, we've got a writer's room, but it's all gonna go through me, and we're gonna make sure all the movies and the shows and the games and the cartoons and stuff are all gonna have a synergy to them. And that's one of the problems with the DC has been having is it was so confusing. You didn't know what was part of the main continuity and what isn't. The movies were doing their own thing, and some of them felt like they were connected to the Snyderverse, but others felt like they were just off in their own corner, and then others were probably Elseworld stories, but then there was talk about, maybe we could connect them into the DCEU and stuff too, and it was but aren't they different universes? How do you do that? It doesn't make any sense. And then you've got all this stuff going on with the TV shows, where I guess stuff like Peacemaker is meant to be in the DCEU, but what about all the CW shows? They're off on their own thing too, and it's all these different things and all these different continuities, and that's one of the problems I always had, why I always had so much trouble getting into DC in the comics, is because they reboot everything every 5 years, so I didn't know what was in continuity and what wasn't. It was the same thing with DC on film. You got the movies, the TV shows on the CW, and then on HBO Max, and the cartoons, and it's all different. And now here he's saying, it's all gonna be the same universe, it's all gonna be interconnected, and it's gonna be so much less confusing now. This is good stuff.
Is outside of that, Matt Reeves' Batman or Todd Phillips' Joker or Teen Titans Go, that it is clearly labeled as DC Elseworlds, outside of the mainstream DCU continuity. Now, Peter and I...
Okay, so if something is an Elseworld story, we're going to clearly label that and market that as an Elseworld story, so you know to keep that separate from the main continuity. Seems like kind of a no-brainer, right? Well, why couldn't the previous regime do that? They would have cleared up a lot of things. Would have made things a lot less confusing, a lot easier to follow, wouldn't it? I like where we're going so far.
I've gotten pretty lucky in terms of the 4 projects that are coming out over the next year. First, we have Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Shazam has always been off kind of in his own part of the DCU, so he connects very well. That moves directly
I don't think you feel lucky
into
about
The
Flash, dude.
A fantastic movie that I really love. That resets the entire DC.
Yeah, you really
universe.
love The Flash with
Blue Beetle, a fantastic film about a kid who's a marvelous part of the DCU, and then into Aquaman 2.
All right, he says The Flash is going to kind of reboot everything and lead us into this next phase. But then you've got Blue Beetle, which he says is going to be a part of the DCEU, but that was a part of the previous regime. So is he kind of picking and choosing which things he wants to be a part of this new DCEU and which is going to stay in the previous continuity? Because if that's where we're going, that could make things confusing again. Because if some things are going to carry over and some things are not, how is that going to work? Then you got to answer the question of, is this the same character from the previous continuity and continuing on with everything that character did previously? Or is it just the same character and the same actor starting fresh? So it's played by the same actor, but it's not the same person as that was. Is it going to be like Daredevil showing up in the MCU, but it's not necessarily the same guy as the Netflix Daredevil? It's a different guy. Clarify, please.
Into our next few projects, which I'm going to tell you about now. So, Peter and I, along with a group of very talented writers, have started to map out an 8 to 10 year plan of what DC Studios will be in film, television, and gaming. This first chapter is called Gods and Monsters.
And gaming
now,
too,
what I'm about to tell you is a part of the first chapter. It's not the entire first chapter. The first project is Creature Commandos. Creature Commandos is an animated series. I've written all the episodes. Something we're going to do that's a little bit different at DC is we're going to have characters move into animation, out of animation, usually having the same actor play their voice as who plays them in live action.
Okay, that's interesting. Because again, we run into the issue of why are certain characters coming before ones that you'd think would be more important. As if the first project they roll out is this Creature Commandos thing, apparently featuring a bunch of characters that I've never heard of. That might be the dude from Doom Patrol. I don't know. Again, not a DC guy, not incredibly familiar with some of the characters. I guess they're lesser known characters, which, as you saw from Guardians of the Galaxy, that's James Gunn's wheelhouse. If he's written all the episodes himself, I have no doubt it'll be a fun show, an entertaining show. I just don't know why they're starting with this one. Of all the things to start with, right? It just seems very odd to me. Could be cool, though. Again, I like what he's saying, because apparently this will count as part of the overarching continuity of the DCU. So this will be a part of it. It'll just be taking place in animation, and you'll presumably have the actors, when possible, voicing their own characters, and if they have to show up in live action at some point, it'll be the same actors, and it'll all count in the same continuity. I like that. Now, animation will make it much more complicated, logistically, which is definitely going to be a larger problem that they're going to have to consider. Because if everything is in the same continuity, they can't be having those knee-jerk reactions anymore, because everything is interconnected. And if one thing doesn't work, it's going to affect everything else. Now, this is something Marvel has gotten pretty good at handling. It has not typically been Warner Brothers' strong suit. So, James Gunn is coming in from Marvel. I'm assuming he knows what he's doing, and he's accounted for those issues. But if we're counting animation as part of the wider continuity, it's gonna, I don't know, there's a lot of issues to consider with that one. Not sure why they're starting with this project of all the things that they could be doing, but, the character designs look pretty cool, I'll give them that. I don't know who these people are, but from this one shot, looks interesting.
The next project up is Waller. This is a story of Amanda Waller, played by Viola Davis. Viola Davis is going to team up with members of Team Peacemaker, and this is a story that's been created by Crystal Henry, who did Watchmen, and Jeremy Carver, who created the Doom Patrol. It is a fantastic story that's out of this world, and I can't wait for people to see it.
Project number 2 is an Amanda Waller series. Why? In my experience, Amanda Waller kind of works best as an antagonist for other characters. She's not necessarily somebody who needs her own show. I'm not saying they can't do something interesting with it, but it's like, do we really need this? And again, apparently it's not only the same actress, but you're carrying over from previous continuity because it's tying in with Peacemaker, which was part of a DCEU, and now she's coming over to the new and fresh DCU, and it's going to be the same continuity as from what Peacemaker was doing. So does that mean Peacemaker is also in the DCU, and that all that stuff is going to carry over? Does that mean the Suicide Squad movie that James Gunn made was also going to be part of the DCEU with all those characters coming back? It's already getting hard to follow. This feels unnecessary. I don't know about this one. Just seems like such an odd choice. Amanda Waller's a badass in her own right, good character in her own right, but she hasn't really built up the kind of cred that, say, like Nick Fury has. So when you put Nick Fury as, like, the main character in, what's the show called? Like, Secret Invasion? It's like, yeah, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because they built up a lot of stuff there. Waller doesn't really have that. She's been in charge of Task Force X, and she's made little cameos here and there, but why do we need this?
Next up is the big one, the true beginning of the DCU. This is called Superman Legacy. This is being written by me. I'm in the middle of it. I'm having a great time doing it. And Superman will be released into theaters July 11th, 2025.
Okay, so this feels like the proper beginning. We got a Superman project in development. Superman Legacy, he's writing it himself, and don't get a lot of information, but he talked about this previously. It's not going to be the Henry Cavill Superman, unfortunately. Would have been cool if Henry got one more solo movie, but it was not to be. So it's going to be a newer, younger Superman in Metropolis. We've kind of seen that before, so I'm hoping he's going to find some kind of new take on it. We know it's not going to be an origin story. He said that already. Here's my wish for this movie. Don't put Lex Luthor in it. Because we've seen a lot of Superman movies, and he's got a great rogues gallery that has been almost completely untouched. Why? Because it's always Lex. He's always fighting Lex in these movies. In the original Richard Donner movies, Lex is always there. And you had Zod in there too, but mainly it was Lex. Then you get to, the start of the Snyderverse. And, okay, starts with Zod. All right, fine. But then here comes Lex. Again, can we get off of Lex for a while and just do something else? I'd like to see Brainiac in this version. Or Parasite. He's a cool character. I've never seen Parasite in a movie. You could tie Brainiac back into the lore of Krypton like they did in Superman the Animated Series. Reference his past and show elements of it without doing like a whole origin, which has been done 100 times. Look, I'm glad that Superman is going to be early. I think he probably should have been the first thing they did. Wish he got a little more information, but I'm glad Superman is coming out early and he's going to be a priority, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more hopeful, get away from the emo Superman. No idea who they're going to cast as these newer, presumably younger incarnations, but at least we know Superman will be a priority again in the DCEU. That's overdue.
Okay, the next thing is a big premiere HBO television series called Lanterns. This is a story of a couple of Green Lanterns, John Stewart and Hal Jordan, and we have a few other Lanterns peppered in there, but this is really a terrestrial-based TV show, which is almost like True Detective with a couple of Green Lanterns who are space cops watching over Precinct Earth. In it, they discover a terrifying mystery that ties into our larger story of the DCU.
Okay, so next we got a Green Lantern series for HBO. Maybe HBO Max, I don't know how that's going to work yet. But you know what that means? It means the Green Lantern project developed by my old nemesis Greg Berlanti is kaput. Bye! Good riddance. Kind of an interesting take. We're going to have Hal Jordan and John Stewart working together, but they're not going to be like out in the universe as space cops. They're going to be kind of Earth-based and solving a mystery of some kind. That's an interesting take. I don't know how that's going to work when you've also got a Batman project in the works, which will presumably be detective-based, but maybe it's going to be kind of more of a cosmic mystery that's going to tie into other things out in the universe, but which have been coalescing on Earth somehow. And I like what he's saying, how they're going to uncover a mystery that's going to tie into the larger universe. They're already sending out those story threads, like that interconnectivity that the DCEU has been lacking for so long. So maybe this is the start of this big mystery that's going to encompass a lot of other projects, and you're going to have that synergy. That's going to create a lot more intrigue and create more interest in these other shows and other movies, and have people be like, oh, I gotta watch the Batman movie to see if they follow up on that mystery that Green Lantern was talking about. Planting those little seeds that bear fruit in other things and sprout branches that go off in all those other directions, but it's all one big thing. Again, this is what made people gravitate to the MCU so much. That's good. The interconnectivity is good. It's kind of a weird idea to have Green Lanterns, but they're not really out being space cops, but more so on Earth. That's kind of strange. I like some of the ideas here. I just think it's kind of a weird approach.
Next is a big movie called The Authority. The Authority is a passion project of mine. It's based on the marvelous Wildstorm characters we are now bringing into the DCU and will interact with all of our primary DCU characters. The Authority are a group of superheroes who think the world is broken and they want to fix it by any means necessary. I think it's a very different look at superheroes.
What? The Authority? Okay, this is where it gets kind of weird, because I guess Wildstorm is owned by DC now, so they've got access to all the Wildstorm characters. I did not expect that we would be seeing those characters pop up so soon. Especially not before other, more major DC characters. I mean, to have the Authority show up before, the Titans or something like that, it's just very strange. I never really got into the Authority, wasn't really my thing, but this does open up some really interesting possibilities. If the Authority are showing up so soon, maybe they've got plans for some of the other Wildstorm characters. Maybe we could see Planetary. Were Planetary Wildstorm? I think they were. There's potential for, Gen 13. They were cool. Wildcats. I mean, we're talking about some of the most 90s shit you could possibly imagine in the comics, but wouldn't you like to see how they could basically update the Wildcats or Gen 13 for the 2020s? That'd be super interesting. It might not work, but I'm super curious to see them try. They might actually have plans for those teams and those properties. I mean, who knows? This is exciting. It's really weird. Again, I don't know why they're doing the Authority so early on, but I'll take it.
We're doing a television series called Paradise Lost. Paradise Lost is the story of Paradise Island, usually known as Themyscira, which is the birthplace of Wonder Woman. It's almost like Game of Thrones with Westeros, but with all of the inhabitants of Paradise Island.
Paradise Island, which I guess, is going to tell a story in like the past of Themyscira, or maybe the origins of Themyscira, how it became what Diana knows it to be, something like that. Yeah, there's potential there. I mean, if they're talking about taking a more Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon-esque approach, using all the politics and backstabbing and stuff, maybe all the Amazons didn't initially get along, and maybe, they kind of branched off. I think there were like different sects of Amazons. All the stories I'm thinking about were really bad ones, though. I think there were kind of like different factions of Amazons that kind of went off on their own and did their own thing, and maybe you could tell the story of how, like, they used to be like one nation of Amazons, but there was kind of a civil war or infighting, and they kind of splintered apart. Maybe it ends with like the birth of Diana. Maybe the whole thing could be like the story of how Diana came to be, or came to be born somehow. It could be like the story of how the Themyscira that we know comes to be in the present, and you're just mining the history of it somehow. Maybe the whole thing is just setting the stage for some kind of Wonder Woman project, because they don't mention Wonder Woman in this slate of announcements. So maybe they want to like lay a path for Wonder Woman down the road and kind of get their ducks in a row. They want to set up the bowling pins before they knock them over. So maybe that's just kind of setting up a foundation that they can build Wonder Woman on at some point later. All right, it's not something that I'm incredibly interested in, but there's potential to do fun things here.
The introduction of the DCU's Batman is The Brave and the Bold. The Brave and the Bold is the story of Batman and his actual son, Damian Wayne. This is based on Grant Morrison's great comic book run. Damian Wayne is my favorite Robin. He's a little assassin who Batman tries to get in line, and so this is the story of the two of them and the beginning of sort of the Bat family in the DCU.
Okay, he said something very important there, which is Bat family, which I like because it seemed like Zack Snyder had no respect for the Bat family. Obviously, you saw what he did with Robin, so that's kind of self-explanatory. It's going to be a little weird, because I guess they're going to have two Batmans at the same time. You're going to have the DCU Batman, which, whoever it is, and then you're going to have Pattinson, the Elseworld Batman, off doing his own thing. But we've already established, thank you James Gunn, that there's going to be like a clear separation. We're not going to try to bring Pattinson over into the DC continuity, even though we said he was off on his own thing. No, it's going to be separate. We're going to have Pattinson over here in the Elseworld, and then we're going to have the DCU Batman here doing this Bat family story, which I think is cool, because that's an angle that we've never seen explored in the movies before. Because we saw, Dick Grayson show up in those Schumacher movies that were not very good, and then, Nolan Batman didn't really, want to use the Robins for whatever reason. Snyder came along and did what he did and had no respect for the lore, because, he kills Robin before we ever saw him, and, I assumed that was Jason Todd, which meant that Nightwing might be out there somewhere, but no, he comes in and says, oh, no, that was Dick Grayson. Joker killed Dick Grayson before we ever met him. Oh, is that what happened? Okay, so we don't get the Bat family at all then. Oh, okay. Seemed like you're leaving a lot of money on the table there. Don't really understand that. Seems like kind of a bad idea. But now we get the Bat family. And if we're starting with Damian, that presumably means that Nightwing and, Jason Todd and maybe Tim Drake are out there too. And we could see all the Robins. Maybe Barbara Gordon as Batgirl. Or, Oracle. Or maybe Stephanie Brown. Who knows? Maybe get them all together? We've never had a live action movie like that before. Where you got Batman and you got Damian. But you've also got Nightwing and Red Hood and Red Robin and all these characters. I mean, that could potentially be really cool. I mean, it could get crowded, but that's an angle we've not seen explored in a Batman movie before, at least not a live action movie. So that sounds like something new. Cool. It does seem a little similar to what we had with Batfleck, in the sense that if we're starting with Damian, I guess it's going to be at least a slightly older Bruce this time. Maybe not as old as what they were going for with Batfleck, but, seems odd. I mean, they wanted to start with a younger Superman, but maybe not necessarily a younger Bruce. I guess they figure Pattinson's covering that part. This Batman can be one that's been around the block a few times, maybe not as many as Snyderverse Batman, but okay.
Next up is a TV series called Booster Gold. Booster Gold is one of comics' really popular cult heroes. He is a fascinating guy. He's a loser from the future who uses future technology to come back to present day and become a superhero so that people will love him. It is basically the superhero story of imposter syndrome on an HBO Max series.
HBO Max Booster Gold series. A loser hero with imposter syndrome. Sounds an awful lot like what James Gunn was going for with Star-Lord, doesn't it? You know, rumors started going around about a Booster Gold project. A lot of people on social media were saying, oh, that's gotta be Chris Pratt. And now that I think about it, Chris Pratt sounds kind of perfect for Booster Gold, doesn't he? But again, it feels really random, because why is Booster Gold showing up before a lot of these other characters? I guess maybe they want to give the others a little bit of a break because we just saw them in the DCEU, so they want to go with somebody new and fresh. Alright, it seems like kind of a random choice, but a Booster Gold potentially with kind of a comedic bent to it? That's right up James Gunn's wheelhouse. He likes those more obscure characters that he can sort of reinvent and, and reshape in his own way, like he did with Guardians of the Galaxy. Definitely classic James Gunn with a project like this. Alright, I'm digging it.
One of my favorite comic book series from last year was Tom King's run on Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow. And so we're going to turn that into a big science fiction epic film. Superman is a guy who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents, whereas Supergirl in this story, she is a character who was raised on a chunk of Krypton. She watched everybody around her perish in some terrible way. So she's a much more jaded character.
Supergirl project, Woman of Tomorrow, based on Tom King's recent run in the comics on Supergirl. Not a DC guy, I'm not reading the comics, I don't know anything about Tom King's run on Supergirl. No, a lot of people on Twitter were not happy when they heard that, though. Like, oh, he's gonna turn, all the superheroes are gonna be depressed, like whiny cucks or something. I don't know. It's gonna be more of a jaded take on Supergirl. Maybe this is gonna be a Supergirl who's like gone through some stuff. Maybe had kind of a rougher upbringing, so she's a little bit like tougher, a little bit rough around the edges. I like the idea of differentiating this new Supergirl as much as possible from the CW version. Was not a fan of that version, as many of you know. Some of the ideas here, they kind of give me pause, because in this environment, it kind of brings up a lot of, well, it raises some ideas, because when you have a Supergirl who, according to James Gunn, is, going to be a little more jaded, a little tougher, it's like, oh, well, that sounds an awful lot like characters I've seen before that I didn't really gravitate to and were not well received by many fans in other female-led projects. I trust James Gunn to be smarter than that and present her in a more likable way than I've seen other people do in other projects. Wouldn't you want a Supergirl project to be a little bit further removed from Superman? Because it kind of seems like you've got them slated not that far apart from each other. They're very similar, maybe not character-wise, but I mean, power-wise, it's the same powers. They're coming from the same lore. To have them so close together, that's odd. And I just now realized if the first one is Superman Legacy, exploring the legacy of Superman, then why do I think they're going to kill him off and then hand the reins over to Supergirl? Just the title Superman Legacy is suspicious to me. And when it's coming out so soon after the Superman movie, I don't know, that's weird. I don't think they're going to do that. It's just very odd. Maybe they've got something up their sleeve here, some kind of trick that they're pulling. Maybe that's part of the larger mystery. Maybe they want to make it look like Superman's dead, and maybe they bring him back later, and Supergirl's a part of that. I don't know. I'm just spitballing here. I'm sure none of that's going to happen. It's just a little weird to me. I would want Supergirl to come in a little further down the line after you've established this new Superman, giving him time in the spotlight, because it seems like he's just getting his feet wet when this new Supergirl comes in who's kind of in the same, she's occupying the same space, basically. So I hope they've got a way to kind of let each of them be their own thing and not intrude on what the other's doing.
And that brings me to Swamp Thing, the last thing we're going to talk about. A very dark horror story in the origins of the monster who is Swamp Thing. And although it's totally outside of the rest of the DCU, it will still feed into the rest of the stories.
Okay. Cool, I can get on board with that, because, again, that's something that we haven't seen explored that much in comic book movies, at least not for a while. I mean, the best examples I can think of would be the Blade movies. Marvel kind of dipped their toe in it with Multiverse of Madness, which they said was a horror movie, but it really wasn't. It was just, a fantasy movie with some darker horror-type elements, not really a horror movie. But Swamp Thing is a character where you can go more horror, and that would make sense. And still, it's another odd choice. Off the top of my head, I can think of a bunch that should probably take priority over Swamp Thing. But hey, I mean, if he's got a good idea, and if it's going to tie into this larger mystery that they're building, all right, if the theme of Chapter 1 of the DCEU is gods and monsters, you gotta have some monsters in there.
Anyway, those are the stories that I can tell you about right now. I've loved the DC characters since I was a child. They're incredibly important to me. I knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do something very different. One of the things that's very important for me in all of these movies and TV series is that the director's vision and the vision of the writers and all of the creators is unique and something special. Storytelling is always king. That's all that matters to us. And I want to be true to those stories. I want to be true to you guys and really give you something different than you've ever seen before.
Storytelling is key. That's all that matters. Yes! That was the right thing to say. That's what they've been missing, is proper storytelling. That's what the DCEU, that's what the Snyderverse, that's why they kept getting ahead of themselves and kept stepping on their own feet and screwing themselves up and making all these rash decisions and going in a million different directions and getting all unorganized and mixed up because they didn't have, the stories laid out. They didn't have a creative architect who knew what story they were telling and where it was going and why. They didn't have a person who could kind of shepherd all those decisions. Zack Snyder was not that guy. I'm sorry. He wasn't. Great cinematographer, not a great storyteller. He wasn't the guy. And after Snyder kind of went away, the movies were just kind of doing their own thing, and there was little to no interconnectivity, and then they tried to do a little bit, but then it didn't work. And then The Rock came in and tried to reboot everything when he made a power play for control of the DC, and that didn't work out, and now they're going to start fresh, and they're going to have a guy who says that storytelling is the most important thing, stressing that right out of the gate. Like, that's what you're supposed to say. That's the important thing. The story and the character should come first.
Anyway, thank you, everybody. I appreciate you watching. I hope this was exciting for you because it's really exciting for me. And I can't wait to start to dive into these stories with you guys on this grand adventure. Thank you so much.
Some kind of odd decisions for your opening slate of projects. Some things I have questions about. I mean, we don't have a lot to go on yet. As more information starts to come out, I guess things will start to make more sense. I still do have concerns overall, but generally, I like what I'm seeing here. If James Gunn is to be the Kevin Feige of DC Studios, he said the right things. Even though I'm not sure about some of the decisions yet, it seems like he's coming at it from the right place. I'm still confused about what is in the new continuity and what is coming over from the old. Like, is Amanda Waller coming in from the old continuity? And if she is, how much of that continuity is carrying over? I think just doing a hard reset of everything would have made things less complicated. But again, we just don't have a lot of information yet. But yeah, that's about it. I think there's a lot to be positive about with this announcement. It's been quite a while since I've been able to say that about the DCEU, or DC on film, I guess, to finally have a proper interconnected universe where everything is the same story, everything is like clear and defined, and you know where everything is, and you're not doing like 50 different continuities, and animation is off doing its own thing, and the CW shows are off doing their own thing. I guess the CW shows are going away now. Flash will do its final season, and then I guess Superman and Lois will have 1 or 2 more seasons after that. I think they said that somewhere, and then that'll be it. And I guess the DC shows, all the new DC shows rather, will be part of the DC universe, and they'll be on HBO or HBO Max, and I guess the CW will have to find a new meal ticket, because they've been beating that drum of the DC shows for too long. Man, they've been leaning on that crutch awfully hard, and it's gotten to be too damn much. I mean, the Arrowverse wore out its welcome a while ago. I'm not going to be losing any sleep to see that thing come to an end. But one thing I'm still wondering about, though, is with the cartoons. Like, how's the animated stuff going to factor into this? Because that's the one area where DC has always really shined. Where DC has consistently outshined Marvel is with their cartoons. Because Marvel may, beat their asses with the movies pretty regularly, but in cartoons, it's no contest. Because Marvel's cartoons, frankly, suck. Not speaking necessarily about the ones produced by other people. I mean the ones produced in-house by Marvel. They suck. What If was garbage. Don't get me started on the other ones, but DC, it's night and day. All the Bruce Timm stuff, Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, anything DC animated is usually pretty damn good. And there's years and years of these things. I would like them to continue with the same output as they've usually had, and hopefully this won't change too much. I mean, you're gonna to have the, the shows like the Creature Commandos that tie into the larger DC universe, but I don't want to lose the stuff we already have. I guess you could still do those, but have them be labeled like Elseworld stories now. I mean, really, you could like do like a whole separate studio of just focusing on Elseworld stuff and have like the whole, all the Bruce Timm projects and all that stuff just be Elseworld cartoons. And you can have the ones that tie in, but I don't want to lose the ones we get because the ones we get are really damn good. I don't want to lose like DC animated because that's always been great. Lots of excitement here, lots of really interesting things, a lot of questions too. I'm not sure how they plan on having not just live action movies and shows, but also cartoons and video games all tie in together. Tying in video games too, that's going to be really fascinating to see how they pull that off, because those things would have to be planned out like years in advance. A lot of questions still. It's really ambitious what they're attempting here. Marvel's kind of got it down to a science, and even they make mistakes sometimes. So overall, feels like a lot of good stuff here. Feels like a lot of stuff to be positive about. We haven't had that for a long time, so I think there's a lot to be happy about here, and I like seeing some positivity about DCU again. Just seemed like there wasn't a lot of that for a while. But now you got a super talented guy with James Gunn, a proven storyteller who knows comics, who knows characters, who knows how to tell a story the right way. I like what I see here. Let's see more. Let's get more information, clear up a couple things, answer a few questions I still have. I'm excited. I'm happy about the potential future of the DCEU. That's good enough for now. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. I hope I didn't ramble too much in this video, but while you're here, please do all the other YouTube things. Ding the bell icon. Follow my social media so you can always be notified when I upload new stuff. You know the drill by now. It's all in the description box. Also, leave a comment and hit that thumbs up. It really helps out against that big red bastard YouTube algorithm. Share the video, subscribe, make sure you're still subscribed, and I'll be back with more soon. So you guys take care, stay tuned. I'll see you next time. Why did I keep these on? I kept the headphones on for the whole video. Why did I do that?